boy, oh boy, oh boy. Welcome, 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 one and all, to yet another episode of Whick TV, a cross ideological space where we come together to talk about issues both political and cultural, from the silly to the serious. Gang, we've got a show for you today. Welcome, Roland Stott. You're coping hard. Nice to see you. Wayne's Brain, always a pleasure. Who we got on YouTube side? No one on YouTube side yet. I always start YouTube a little after, or at least no one's talking on that side. But welcome Twitchers, welcome Kickers, and when YouTube gets here, welcome YouTube.
Whick. Not kickers, kick-us.
Kick-us. Oh, that's true. I can't use the hard R. Okay, only with the term Wickers, which we are, right? That's me. So I get to use the hard
My Wicker.
True. But anyway, jokes aside, we're here to talk about the woke right. Is it a thing? What is it? How do we define it? Who's part of the woke right? How did it come to be a thing? Why does everyone seem to be arguing with James Lindsay about it? Right? Lots to discuss here, lots to unpack, and we have some great guests to do it with. And I'm going to let them introduce themselves just briefly, and then we'll just kind of hand the mic to Ryan, and he can start us off by defining what he thinks woke right is, and then we'll kind of get into it. PF Jung, who are you? What do you do? Why should we listen to you?
What a phenomenal question. My name is PF Jung. My name is Paul, actually. I have a YouTube channel called PF Jung, and I am interested in the psychology of political disagreement, and I interrogate that in order to build bridges to end polarization so we can enact important reforms for our aging, decrepit institutions and bring about a new era of positive discourse, one that isolates itself from the freaks on the right and the left. And there's no better way to destroy the freak left and freak right than by robbing them of their only valid talking points. And that is what I do as a radical centrist and apparently woke centrist. How's that?
I mean, it's up to you. Like, fair enough, right? That's your words. Woke
fair
enough. We'll go with it. We'll talk about if that's a thing too.
According to James Lindsay, I am the woke right, but I prefer the woke center.
We'll find out. Ryan, same question to you. Who are you? What do you do? Why should we listen to you?
Ryan, I'm a current lawyer, former teacher. I talk about law, education, philosophy on X, and probably should have something to promote, but don't. So find me on X, and one day I'll have something to promote when I do. And to answer your questions, Wick, really briefly, I think we're talking about woke right, mainly because James Lindsay is an asshole. I mean that genuinely. Like, he pegged it, he got the definition right, but he can be such a troll on X that it becomes impossible to track down what he actually meant. What I'm hoping we can do tonight is actually get a clear, concise definition of what woke means. It applies fairly to the left and right, doesn't require you to deep dive 100 hours of his YouTube channel to understand, and that we can kind of then, Paul did it well, label the degenerates and the extremists on both sides and mock them for being the children they are.
Okay. I'm going to start, I think, actually, despite what I just told you like 2 seconds ago, I'm going to start with what I consider woke, and you guys can tell me where I'm wrong, of whether you agree with me, whether you disagree with me, what you think. Because I think when we talk about, like, woke is one of those words that has been, it's in danger of becoming, like the word Nazi, meaningless almost, like used just for everything, all the time when you just disagree with someone. And I think it's important to kind of narrow it down, define it, and figure it out. And that's the only way I think we can move forward here. So here's what I think woke means. And you can, again, correct me if you think I'm wrong. I'm open to better definitions. My understanding is that wokeness is using collectivism, identitarianism, usually involving some form of grievance politics, oppressor-oppressed dynamics, in order to attack classical liberal ideals, institutions, values, things like that. That's what I would consider wokeness. Why am I wrong?
Obviously not wrong, because that's a beautiful definition that I coined last time I was on your show. So I'm a big fan of it. I think the reason it works is that it's fair And it doesn't do what James is trying to do. With all due respect to James Lindsay, what he's trying to do is get in the head of the woke and saying, what is their internal psychology? What do they believe? Which I'm not sure you can do, and you certainly can't do online with someone that you've never met. It's just not really possible accurate. What that definition does is it tracks expressed behavior. And it says, are you doing two things? Are you doing the grievance, the identitarian collectivist grievance? Are you attacking classical liberal values or institutions, etc., attacking classical? And I think if you have a robust definition of classical liberalism, and so I should say robust and constrained, so it's not a constantly morphing chimera itself, then that works. And I think that if you apply that to somebody like X. Kendi, who's was the darling of the intellectual left during dark ages of the 2020, and he famously said the only remedy to past discrimination is future discrimination. What's he saying? There were grievances, for in his case, racial grievances in the past, and the way to remedy them is to attack the most foundational classical liberal value, which everyone as an individual. He would jettison that because of a grievance. That's, to me, the definition of woke.
What about you, Jung? Or Paul, get in on this. What do you think?
My definition is much simpler. Forget the classical liberalism. A woke person is someone who uses identity politics to silence other people. I.e., Douglas Murray saying we can't criticize Israel because it might foster anti-Semitism. I.e., the far left saying we can't criticize, like black culture because racists criticize the elements of black culture. That's the relevant, simple, important fact that characterizes wokeness. Attacking liberalism, it's like, okay, religious Christianity is against classical liberalism, depending on what strain you believe in. So I don't think it has to do the attacks on classical liberalism. If you call that woke, you're way using the label too much. Woke refers to a type of person who says you can't or you shouldn't talk about this because it might hurt people and their feelings or something like that. And that is what the real woke right does when it comes to Israel. Don't criticize Israel because of all the history of anti-Semitism, and you might sound like an anti-Semite, and all the things that Douglas Murray said to Dave Smith, particularly in the very end of their conversation when Dave Smith brought up what was this? Something Wolfowitz, Paul Wolfowitz, and Dick Pearl, and Douglas Murray was like, it's weird that you're bringing up Jewish last names when you're criticizing Israel. It's like textbook woke identity politics.
I think your definition misses the mark, and the reason it does is it focuses on a really, really specific behavior, and it leaves a lot of stuff that I think would be textbook woke on the cutting room floor.
Okay, like what?
You know who Eli Mistal is? If you don't, good for you. No one should know who he is. He's a commentator on MS, a lawyer, and he went to a fantastic school, and often articulates racial grievances. And famously, he once said the following. In March 2022, he said the United States Constitution is actually trash, pointing to things like the Fugitive Slave Clause and the Three-Fifths Compromise. Yeah, he said, quote, we act like this thing was etched in stone by the finger of God when actually it was hotly contested and debated, scrawled out over a couple of weeks in the summer of Philadelphia in 1787 with a bunch of rich white politicians making deals with each other. Now, he's not attempting to silence anyone about anything.
Sure.
But to me, that's very woke. You're saying the Constitution of the United States is trash because of racial grievances that you're advocating.
If I said to you, the Constitution is not sacred, and it was not etched in stone, and the idea that we hold it sacred is foolish, would that make me woke? Because I believe that.
Not by itself. It'd make you wrong, but not woke.
That's fine, but not woke.
If you said...
So he just went overboard on
the Constitution is trash because it allowed white people to be replaced, now you're woke.
The Constitution
because you're partnering a racial or identitarian grievance with an attack on classical liberal values. You have to do both.
So,
can I give you one other example? Because I know
your mic's a little woke right now, by the way.
Yeah. I've talked to a bunch of Christian nationalists.
Yeah, hold on, real quick. Ryan, for your microphone, do you want to try just going into the audio settings, voice settings, and turn off the input sensitivity, automatically determine input sensitivity. It's like a radio button.
I don't know, it glitched for a minute. They heard us talking about woke, and Zog is trying to silence us right now. Okay.
Hey, dude, tell me about it, bro.
Okay. They're
there
here.
you go.
They're in my walls. What a disaster. Indeed, what a disaster. But are we back, gang? Can you see us
Yes.
now? On
I think the
YouTube?
stream is live.
Okay. Oh, no. Hold on. Give it a minute.
Your stream is
for
live.
Twitch,
I can see it.
For Twitch to catch up. Twitch is behind. Oh, now we're back. Okay. Welcome. We're back, baby. We're back. I don't know why that happens, but every once in a while it will happen, usually once a show
Zog.
at some point. Yes. But at what point did I cut out?
When you said you were agreeing with me on something, but I don't know what.
Nothing.
I don't think that's what I was saying. I think that you're
okay. I don't know then.
I think that you were correct in that wokeness is often used as a tool to silence people, right? To violate their First Amendment, right? Violate their free speech, more correctly put. However, I think that's not all it does. I think that it's merely one aspect of a wider range of behaviors. I think that I would best describe it, and I might part from Ryan on this, is I don't think woke is so much belief as it is a set of behaviors. It's a way of doing things, right? It's doing cancel culture, right? And engaging in kind of like this victimization game of straight white men are the most oppressed class in America now, that feminism has attacked it. And so therefore we have to deport all the minorities that they've bust in from Mexico, and we got to deport them by limiting their free speech. And if they write something critical about Israel, we ship them off and we ship them out, which we're seeing now. I think that would be
hold on.
Behavior.
Okay, that I see it like that. I don't. Earlier, Ryan, you said, because I said basically woke is when you use identity politics, racial, sexual, whatever, to silence people or to, beat them over the head or to rhetorically abuse them, whatever. Cancel culture, you could put it in that category, I guess. Can you give me an example of a behavior that is woke? I don't understand how that is not the primary thing we're talking about. What's an example of a behavior that you would consider woke that doesn't have that?
There are people in the Christian nationalist sphere now who will invoke feminism to say that women should no longer have the right to vote.
That's identity politics, yeah?
Okay. So what do you have? That's one of the two things I said. You have an identitarian grievance justifying an attack on classically liberal values. They're not actually saying, hey, you should shut up or you shouldn't be heard or you shouldn't be able to speak. They're saying you shouldn't be able to vote. It's very different than trying to say, you shouldn't be able to talk about men's or women's issues. It's a much more foundational attack on like the right to be an individual in society. Similarly, on the left-hand side, Ibram X. Kendi famously called for a constitutional amendment, which obviously it's never going to happen, thank God, but he wanted to create a bureau in the government which, if they ever saw more than a 5% disparity between any group of people on any metric, would have the power to go into society and fix that by whatever means would be.
That's nonsense.
That's obviously crazy nonsense. Obviously very woke. And the reason I'm bringing these up is that these are beyond the ambit of just are you trying to shame someone so that they don't talk publicly?
Oh, okay. Well, I see.
It's part of it, but it goes beyond that.
So you don't think that Douglas Murray is woke right?
No, I don't think Douglas Murray is woke right. I think he supports classical liberal values.
Okay, hold on.
I do think he has an axe to grind. Yeah.
When Douglas Murray implies that Dave Smith is fomenting anti-Semitism because he mentioned someone with a Jewish last name, how is that not functionally the exact same as, what was his name, Eli Steele? I think I do know who you're talking about, actually. He has gray hair.
Nostalgia.
Oh, maybe not.
Yeah.
Whatever. How is it different from a woke black person saying, it's interesting that you criticized that if I'm criticizing Kamala Harris, and then they say, it's interesting that you're criticizing Kamala Harris, a black woman. I just find it interesting. It's a little weird that you're doing that. The implication being that my criticism is because she's black and not because she's incompetent. That's exactly what Douglas Murray did on the Dave Smith podcast.
I haven't seen that. You were on the Dave Smith podcast? I saw the Rogan one.
Excuse me, the Joe Rogan podcast. Yeah, sorry. Okay. With Dave Smith. The Joe Rogan podcast with Dave Smith. That is textbook woke behavior. And if your definition precludes that behavior, then I don't think it's a very good definition. Because I would say the most fundamental thing that I'm concerned about, and I think we should be concerned about when it comes to the discourse, is freedom of speech, freedom to articulate whatever ideas we have, no matter how harmful people think they are. And the principal danger of woke is a form of soft censorship, which is that you can't criticize black people because they're black, even if they happen to be incompetent individuals. You can't criticize Jews because they're Jews, because of the history of anti-Semitism. It's like, no, that's woke. And that's far more relevant, I think, than also having the element of attacking classical liberalism, because who cares? You can attack. Why can't you just attack classical? People can attack classical liberalism because they don't like classical liberalism. I think neoliberalism is mid. I think liberalism is not all that great. I think democracy is the best tool that we have, but it's certainly not sacred. And democracy, as we understand it, where it's like, well, I'd say the Electoral College is not very democratic. I think the Supreme Court, we have 9 people unelected, appointed basically by random chance of whoever happens to be dead during a given president's term, that those 9 people in a 5-4 decision can determine the fate of an entire democracy. Probably not perfect. Now, does that make me woke? No, because like you said, it has to have the racial element. But then the racial element and the identity politics element, not the racial, but the identity politics element, that's the key thing when people are complaining about wokeism. Tell me why.
You said a bunch of stuff, so I'm going to try to go after it, but I'm not sure I'm going to get it in the right order.
Okay, all right. That's fine.
I think the first thing is, if you don't hold classical liberal values, and by the way, I'm saying classical liberal, not liberalism, not left-right liberals, like classic liberalism, meaning like, for example,
Judeo-Christian is what I would
close, actually. Like the idea that like your rights are not given to you by the government; they are inherited because you are in the image of God. They are natural law.
Correct.
Your rights are not given to you; you have them. The government can take them away, but you can't. But they can't give it to you. That kind of old school classical liberalism is what, for example, makes me an originalist. So I'm not talking about I think we might be using the term slightly differently. So we'll start just to clear that up. And then I do think if you don't hold that sacred, why would you give a shit about free speech? That's a classical liberal value. Like the only reason you should care about free speech is because you hold classical liberal values sacred. It's a classical liberal value.
Okay. Now that you've clarified that we're talking, when you say, let's stop using classical liberal and use Judeo-Christian instead. How about?
Well, it's not this. Hold on. I object to that because Judeo-Christian...
Oh, he objects, you fucking anti-Christian bastard.
Well, Judeo-Christianity contains a lot more than is contained in classical liberalism. Classical liberalism might be based off of and inspired by many Judeo-Christian values, but it also incorporates other things. And also, Judeo-Christian values there's a host more to that than just classical liberalism. Let me read my $10 super chat while you process. And Caleb, thank you for the $10, Caleb, says, woke for needs to also encompass a strong anti-institutional and selective acceptance of expertise in science, pro-IQ science but anti-epidemiology, pro-gender science until data is inconvenient, etc. Thank you for the $10. Not sure I agree, but I appreciate the money. But yeah, so I think Judeo-Christian is a way of sneaking in a lot of concepts by agreeing us. Like I don't find that helpful.
Okay, fine. It comes down to Go ahead.
At the risk of opening the Jordan Peterson wormhole, one of my favorite Petersonisms was that essentially what I'm talking about when I say classical liberal values is the flowering of the Judeo-Christian tradition.
Yes, I agree.
When the founders came, they were a collection of Christians, and like me, I'm a deist, so Christians and deists, and what they did is they took this value that the divine is the individual, and everyone must be treated as an individual.
Yes.
And then what they did is they said, what if we have the greatest political experiment of all time, and we take the greatest minds of our generation, and we sit and we don't rush it because we have time. We think for months, and we come up with a system of government that is designed in every way to honor that principle. That there are individuals with rights worth honoring. There is
Correct. All right, we agree on this. We agree.
It's not exactly Judeo-Christian because it's not the Bible, but that's what I mean when I say.
I agree. Okay, now we're talking about. Okay, I understand what we're talking. I'm talking about the same thing.
I think in that vein, like you have to have a little wiggle room. Like speech is tricky, right? Like I think we both agree if someone was trying to use the power of the government to silence people because they criticize Israel, that's a problem.
Is woke. That's woke.
So Trump is woke.
Do you agree that that's woke, Ryan? Because that
would strike me as woke. If you're using a racial or collectivist grievance to stifle free speech on behalf of Israel, that would strike me as woke.
Okay, well there we go. We agree. Nothing more to argue about. Congratulations.
In a conversation, though, there's a little bit of a difference, right? When you're not using governmental power, like I think you can have a disagreement and even say that you think someone's saying something inappropriate without stifling the value of free speech. I don't know exactly what Murray said, so I'm at a bit of a disadvantage.
Well, I posted a 3-minute clip that went viral, and James Lindsay himself quote tweeted me and called me woke right for posting it. So, Whick, if you want to, I'd be happy to pull up the clip. If it's
share the screen. Share the screen.
That would actually be very helpful.
Yeah,
this would be very
just share
relevant.
The screen and we'll watch it in here. We'll all watch it together.
Well, hold on. While I find it. Maybe bring up another point or something I can contend with because I don't have it bookmarked.
He's messing with that. Like so,
I think just the thing that's important about getting this right now is that the left got cannibalized by wokeism. Like it just became rampant to the point where it almost became the dominant school of thought within the party and definitely cost them the election. On the right, this is new. It's emerging, and I think that there's different reasons why people use the term. A lot of people use woke right because they want to hack MAGA or they want to score political points. But there are people, and I do think, for all my disagreements with them, James Lindsay is one of them, they're trying to call this out early because they don't want what happened to the left to happen to the right.
Yes, but they are, yes, but this is, okay. I think we should watch the Douglas Murray clip. Sure. I send it to you, Whick.
Share your screen. Oh, you guys.
You want me to do it?
Either one. You should.
I don't want to. I have a lot of deeply unsavory illegal shit on my computer that I don't want to show up.
Okay, DM it to me.
Don't have a vouch moment.
I sent it to you. Yeah.
Okay, let me bring it up. I'm gonna pause it right here. It's a 3-minute clip. We'll watch it.
3-minute clip. Play it at 1.25 or whatever. Or whatever speed. Yeah.
Okay, clicky, so we can all see.
Yep.
Here, I'll just so it's front and center. Well,
and just for context, real quick, Dave Smith is talking about Paul Wolfowitz. Paul Wolfowitz was the secretary or the deputy defense secretary under Donald Rumsfeld. Okay, and that's basically all. And Paul Wolfowitz is Jewish. That's basically what you need to know for this clip.
Okay, let's watch the clip and see what happens.
To attribute American foreign policy in the last 40 years to Paul Wolfowitz and Dick Pearl is, knowingly or otherwise, to encourage a conspiracy that has very obvious legs. And I just urge you not to do it.
Okay, let me respond to this a little bit. First of all, it is not at all saying that these guys therefore just control everything. I'm just pointing out what a 4-star general claimed, where plans originated, and that they ended up being implemented. That doesn't mean that they were the absolute ruler or arbiter of what was going to happen. But again, I got to say, for you to say that I can't bring up the neoconservative...
I never said you couldn't. I just laughed.
Let me just... Right, but the implication is that I'm unwittingly giving fertile ground to some Jew-hating conspiracy if I bring up a guy who's got a Jewish last name who was a consequential person in our government. This is identical to the arguments of the woke left. That would just be if you even say something, if you bring up the crime rate in Chicago, you're basically a bigot because other people could take this and run with it.
Come on.
No, you come on. What's the argument?
Look, if you said to me...
I said a 4-star general said something, and there's no... What's the response?
If you said to me, or somebody said to me, don't you think that some people are running the global financial system? And I said, possibly. And I said, who do you think it is? And they said, the Rothschilds. I think I'd be right in saying there was something a bit off about the character of the person doing that, because it seemed like they were playing to some kind of lazy old trope. And I think similarly that if you give the implication that a cabal of people, particularly, and you should be really careful about this because of the people who will come up underneath you, if you give the implication that these cabals exist and you decide to elevate the Jews or people with Jewish names in it and then play down the non-Jews, I can tell you, you will be opening up a world of madness.
But am I really playing down the non-Jews? I mean, go look at the stuff that I've said about Obama, about George W. Bush.
You said Middle East policy is Dick Pearl and Paul Wolfowitz, and I said,
no. I mean, this is why I'm saying this is a woke leftist tactic. I literally just mentioned that a 4-star general said this. I'm quoting him, and now you're telling me that this is the same thing as promoting.
That when you quote somebody, it's a totally arbitrary thing that you just pluck out of the air.
I'm not arguing that it's arbitrary. I'm saying I'm using the quote for a reason. I was connecting it to an argument.
And I'm saying to you,
I'm giving fertile ground to Jew haters to mention it.
I think that when you decide to elevate what is a conspiracy of people who are overthrowing the governments of various countries, some of which haven't been overthrown and others of which have, but by the way, were not overthrown by American dominance, certainly not in Syria. And then you say that the people who are doing it are these people with Jewish names. I think you should be more judicious than that, because you probably know what bubbles up underneath you online by now. To attribute...
Never have I seen more wokeness jam-packed into a 3-minute clip. Oh, it's kind of weird if you bring up a guy with a genuine discourse on an important subject, one needed to be talked about, and Douglas Murray with his woke identity politics comes in and says, it's just weird that you're doing that. I'm questioning your character. This is the kind of soft cancel culture bullying tactics that is a textbook tactic of the woke left. There's no criticism of classical liberalism in there. The important thing that makes someone's woke is that nonsense from Dougie.
That's a very interesting clip to have selected. I guess the question I would have is, if we're going to label that woke,
yeah,
how does one ever push back against, like, if you think that somebody is saying something inappropriate or doing something that either find offensive or you think is, just not the sort of thing they should be saying? Like, how would you ever go about doing that?
Because, depends. Because I'm a classical liberal, as you pointed out, I believe that when it comes to the free exchange of ideas on controversial topics, almost none of it is relevant. I don't give a fuck if people are offended on the most controversial topic that we're talking about. Jordan Peterson 101, you can't think without risk being offensive, or you can't think without risk being offensive. So any kind of, you shouldn't say that or whatever. Now, if someone is very clearly trafficking in lies, and you call them out for that. So if someone says something that they know to be untrue, that is where you say, okay, now this is bullshit, and now we're going to exclude you from the conversation, because you're knowingly poisoning the discourse with false information. But until someone is willing to say that you're a liar, calling someone an anti-Semite or a racist or a communist or whatever fucking label you want to call someone, is not a valid, is just an attempt to silence discussion on an important issue.
I think that steps a bit too far for me, because free speech cuts both ways, right? Like, if you respect the value of free speech, you have to respect the value that people can say things you disagree with. They can say things that you find offensive, and that applies to you and it applies to them. But that would also apply to people saying, I find that offensive, right? Like, it applies to everything. So it only becomes...
And I would call those people woke, and I would say, you're free to say that, and I'm not trying to censor you. And me calling Douglas Murray woke right is not my attempt to censor him.
So anyone criticizing Dave Smith in that regard is being woke? By saying, hey, I think Dave Smith brings up Jews an awful lot. And I've noticed that. He's bringing up Jews an awful lot.
That's textbook
woke to notice that?
Of course. That's the it's like saying,
wild.
This white...
That's wild. But go on.
Well,
explain. Let him explain.
Hold on. Hold on. No, wait. Hold on. I'm going to address what Whick said. Because what is the implication that when you say that, Whick? I'm noticing that Dave Smith, a guy who talks about Israel, I wonder why Jews would come up in discussions about the Jewish state. So the implication that you're putting, even in the tone that you just said it, was the wokest thing you could possibly do, which is, I wonder why Dave Smith constantly talks about Jews. Maybe he's a racist. That's the soft woke bullying cancel culture
So we can't
bullshit.
ever
That is
ask if someone's a
definition of woke.
racist? Can
No.
we never interrogate whether or not someone is a racist?
No, Kathy Newman, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying calling someone a racist for bringing up something that is self-evidently not racist, like the fact that Deputy Defense Secretary Paul Wolfowitz has a Jewish last name, which wasn't even the fact, that he just named that person about something far more consequential. That is woke. To say, well, are some people racist?
Okay. Well, let me.
I guess
I think that's very convenient cover, I think, for never being able to call out someone for anti-Semitism ever. Because if you do, because again,
Okay,
that was 3 minutes of a longer conversation, if I may finish.
That's what the woke left would say about.
No.
Go ahead.
The woke left would say anti-Semitism's good, actually, and we should do it more. But that's another conversation.
But I'm talking in the context of like black people. Like if you criticize black culture, right, whatever that means, it's like, hey, it's not good that, for example, it seems to be a norm that if you speak proper English as a black person, that makes you somehow less black. Like that's bad. That's stupid. That's fucking lame.
It is.
Oh, but Paul's white, and Paul, it's odd that a white person is criticizing a black cultural phenomenon. I wonder why
did it every
implication
day,
being I'm racist.
If every day you came on my show and every day you wanted to talk about, it's weird that 15% of the population engages in 50% of the crime, and every day, every single day, you brought up those statistics you wanted to talk about. I'm giving you an example, right?
Yep.
If I don't think it would be woke or even inappropriate to wonder out loud, hey, that's really weird that you keep bringing up black people.
I agree. 100% agreed.
And in the context...
This has nothing to do with Israel.
In the context of that conversation, though, with Murray and Dave Smith, the reason that they got in that conversation, as I recall, was that Murray was concerned that Rogan was having on a series of people that were saying things like, Churchill's the villain in World War II, and we don't need to litigate that, but like the concern was that he was, rightly or wrongly, and I had not watched all these episodes, so I'm not taking on that he was platforming one side of the anti-Semitism, World War II revisionism, and not the other side. And
okay, that's a valid critique.
Critiquing that behavior, seems very fair game.
100%.
Okay, so you don't take issue with Douglas Murray's position on the whole.
No, I agree with Douglas Murray on that. That Joe Rogan should have Ben Shapiro on ASAP. He should host a debate with Dave Smith. He should bring all of the pro-Israel people on his podcast, and there should be more discourse between them. And Daryl Cooper, I think, I've listened to Daryl Cooper's podcast, and people who have listened to Fear and Loathing in Jerusalem. The whole that he's an anti-Semite is so laughably beyond ridiculous that only someone who is ignorant of the person would say that. But I do agree he's a coward for not being willing to debate a real historian about his claim that Churchill was the primary villain in World War II. I think, okay, that's evidence that Daryl Cooper is cowardly and intellectually insecure. If he's willing to go on Tucker Carlson and say that, but not have a debate with someone who's informed on it. That's not a woke critique. That's a very valid critique of you don't know what you're talking about, as evidenced by your fear of engaging in a real discourse. That's completely different from saying, Daryl Cooper, he's an anti-Semite, so therefore he shouldn't be listened to. It's like whether or not someone is racist, it is not making any claim about the validity of their truth claims. Totally irrelevant. They're terrible. There are truths that are racist. It's like
no, I agree. I don't disagree with this.
You can be a terrible person and be right. Like there's no
correct, right? And the woke issue is implying that when you are having a genuine, non-racist discussion about like the deputy defense secretary who happens to be named Paul Wolfowitz, and the context was the entire conversation about the conflict in the Middle East with Israel, which is probably the most like controversial topic of the last 2 years. So the claim that Whick, you're like, well, but if someone brings it up all the time, it's like, well, children are constantly being killed every day. I think it's fair to point this out and bring up the role that like Israel has in influencing our politics.
But the problem I have with
And let me be clear.
Well, hold
Let's
on,
be very clear.
Be clear real quick that I got a couple super chats, and then I'll let then I have a response and Ryan can respond. And apparently, you're either Artie Lang or Homelander, one of the two. But anyway,
Artie Lang, is that James Vanderbeek?
I'm not sure. I don't know who that is.
No. Sorry, continue.
No, I wanted you to finish your point, and then I was going to read super.
That was my point. My point was I noticed at the end of that sentence I was getting worked up.
Okay, that's fine.
And I would like to acknowledge that.
No, we're all. This is fun. It's
emotional
a fun
instability.
We can.
I'm tired of seeing dead children on my timeline all the time. That's what bothers me.
I mean, no one likes dead children.
Follow Whick.
$20 from Crash Out or Cash Out to say I dislike the debate. The origin of being woke stems from the black communities being aware/woke to understand the now based on the past. Sociology and psychology effects adopted by the mainstream pop, especially feminism and LGBTQ. Well, thank you for the $20 and then $5 more from the same person. Critical race theory was considered woke, but was shut down because it makes certain groups feel guilty because ultimately it made people aware. #woke. Thank you for the $5. I just think we have a different definition of woke. I think that while you might be right on
woke as hell.
I think he might be right on the origin of the word itself, right? But words shift in meaning, and I think that as it was adopted by the more mainstream culture, it did shift in meaning, and I think that's where we are now. And then Caleb, a member for 1 month. Thank you for being the Tier 1 member for 1 month. Ask P.F. Young if Churchill was the main villain.
If Churchill was the main villain?
Yeah, was Churchill.
No, I tend to think the guy that committed industrial mass extermination was probably the main villain. If I had to put my money on it, Stalin up there too is pretty bad.
It's funny. I was actually on Tim Pool.
Yeah.
I was actually on Tim Pool, and I asked him a similar question. He struggled to answer that question. He was like, well, I don't really know.
To the degree I get. The point, again, that Daryl Cooper was making is that Winston Churchill did not act in a way that could have maybe restrained the war, which I don't necessarily know is true or not. The fact that Daryl Cooper is too much of a coward to debate it with a real historian makes me think it's not true. But fine, let him say it, and then let me and other people come on and say he's a coward for not willing to debate someone on it. That's a much more effective way to address false information than implying that they're anti-Semitic or something like that.
Yeah, but again, like the problem I have mainly with your contention of this clip specifically is that it's in the context of a larger conversation and the larger body of work that Dave Smith has engaged in, and I think it's not necessarily woke or even inappropriate to ask that question. To ask, is Dave Smith engaged in kind of this dog whistling, soft anti-Semitism? Now, the answer might be no, right? But I don't think it's a crime or even inappropriate to ask, especially if you're asking him directly, right?
The funny thing about it is that the critique that Murray had would also be of Smith and of, I forgot his name now, the historian you mentioned.
Daryl Cooper.
Daryl Cooper. It is another like classic woke playbook, which is say things publicly, but you never debate. You say you want to be treated like a public intellectual, but you will not expose yourself to the scrutiny and the rigor that is expected of a public intellectual, so your ideas are never tested. And that was really Murray's issue that he was raising
100%.
in that debate. And so I think you have to have a little bit of a zone of discretion. You know, like I see what you're saying. I think there are certainly instances of somebody saying, you can't speak to this because you're not a black man, or you can't speak to this because you're insufficiently oppressed, where I would agree with you. I think that you've got to have some zone where people can talk about the idea that I am a little concerned that you keep bringing up the Jews. I am a little concerned that you keep saying that women are inferior. Like maybe we should talk about that.
Of course. There's absolutely space for that. I would not say that by itself is woke. Everything needs to be put into context. And I'm saying the reason I selected that clip, and the reason it went viral, it wouldn't have gone viral if there wasn't some element of truth to it, is that in that instance, it was very, very. Do you disagree that what Douglas Murray was doing? He wasn't asking. He didn't say, Dave, you talk about Israel a lot. You talk about Israel a lot, and I just want to know, like, do you believe in Jewish conspiracies? Do you, what do you think of the whatever? You could ask him all those kinds of things in the spirit of genuinely getting information out of him. That's not what Douglas Murray was doing. Douglas Murray was implying that because Dave Smith said the last name of a Jew, Wolfowitz, it somehow might be trafficking in anti-Semitic conspiracy theories. That's
wasn't
woke.
It's not a question of a conversation.
Huh?
Wasn't that like hour 2 of a conversation?
That was in the last, probably like 20 minutes of the, I don't know how long it was, 2 hours, something like that.
Yeah, so I mean, that's what I mean. Like, I think by the time you get to that point in the conversation, I think
Did you watch the debate?
I watched parts of it. I wouldn't say I watched the whole thing.
I did. I did.
Okay.
I hasn't I didn't do it yesterday, right? So and it was a long conversation, so fair enough.
Uh-huh.
But
from my recollection, by the time they got into like the hour mark, there was quite a lot of conversation about whether or not people were.
Sorry.
So anyway, the Jews are doing that. Oh, sorry.
Oh shit, Whick's back.
No, I don't know what's wrong with my internet. I need to get that fixed. I apologize. It will be back up for YouTube and Twitch momentarily. I see the red light on. It's going to go to green any second now. I am connected to the internet again. I'm glad it's very brief, but it's still annoying.
True. We do have to pause the discussion because the stream goes out as well.
Yes, I am sorry about that. My apologies. My bad. They got me again. Hamas did it this time. Last time it was Zog. This time it was Hamas. That's fair. Okay.
Let's be radical centrist here, right? Both sides are angry about this.
I find it a little strange that you brought up Hamas just like.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Isn't it weird how I bring up terrorists when they terrorize?
A little weird.
Interesting that you say that. Anyway, what were you were saying? I asked if you had seen the whole podcast.
2 hours. 2 hours of the thing. Yeah. So I guess again that clip being at the end, I think. Look, you can disagree with Douglas Murray's assessment, but I don't think it is out of the blue, nor is it woke, nor is it.
Of course, it's not out of the blue.
I don't think it's inappropriate for Douglas Murray to imply that, hey, Dave Smith, I think you're maybe a little bit anti-Semitic here, based on the
that's the wokest thing I've heard you say, Whick. That's ridiculous.
Are you being paid to defend Dave Smith here?
Are you being paid by the woke right to say that that Dave Smith is an anti-Semite, noted Jew?
You have
Dave
a
Smith?
Secret master, some secret society that
I just think I mean, to be clear, there's a lot of things that Douglas Murray said on that podcast that I agree with, even on the topic of Israel. Like, for example, that when you see all of the devastation in the images of Gaza, you have to remember that Hamas puts ammunition and shit in a lot of those houses. And so when a single missile strike comes down, it hits one house and then it sets off a daisy chain. And that is in part why the destruction is as significant as it is. Hamas is as bad as Israel. There's no fucking disputing that. I would not ever say that, okay? Or not ever say that Hamas is justified. I'm not far left. That's the woke left bullshit, right? You cannot criticize the IDF if you're not also willing to criticize Hamas. You lose all your moral high ground there. So, if I haven't properly given that perception,
okay, yeah, no, you're fine.
My apologies.
We're not. This isn't a struggle session. You don't have to. I condemn Hamas, right? We get it.
That's
we're not struggle.
That's woke. That's woke. Requiring people to condemn Hamas is woke.
Look, I want to take it back just a little bit from this specific moment and go to the more conceptual. Candace Owens, do you consider her woke, right?
I generally don't use the term woke right unless it's talking about the people who I described fit my definition, using race politics or identity politics to silence others through hard or soft means. And does Candace Owens do it? Candace Owens is a grifter. Candace Owens is a bit of a loon. Is she an anti-Semite? Even if she was, I think calling her that just reduces your ability to leverage other more useful criticism down the line. So it's the same reason that even if I thought someone was genuinely racist, or even if I thought someone was engaging in hate speech, I wouldn't call it hate speech. Just on
what about a genuine separatist? Someone who's actually calling for races should live separately. Well, that woke?
That's pretty woke.
Okay, but that's not a speech. Let's say they're very polite and cordial in conversation. They'll let you say whatever they want. They just think that there should be a white nation and a black nation.
Again, look, this is there's sort of a the nature of this conversation is somewhat fraught because essentially we're debating something that is not entirely, but fundamentally comes down to vibes, which is what is the best way to use the word woke? And there is no that's a question that cannot be answered through logical debate. It's only through it's like if two football teams are going to play each other and we're debating on who's going to win. It's like we can debate all day long, but ultimately we don't know until the football teams play out. And so I'm making the case that the woke term the woke or the woke right should be reserved for people who are censoring people and silencing free speech in the name of identity politics, which is what the principal problem was on the left. If a black nationalist said, I want to separate from the United States, as equals, which is what Malcolm X advocated, for example, would I call that woke? I would say I'm sure that accompanies a lot of woke beliefs, but that's actually not the primary issue. The primary issue would be if people like that said, you can't criticizing me as racist. If someone said, I want to separate, and if you criticize me for my racial separation beliefs, then you're racist. Then that would be woke in the way that is more consequential than just having an idea that I disagree with.
Here's my problem with the way that you're using the term. And I agree with you, by the way. This is a brand new term. We've kind of invented it recently and evolved it recently. So it's not like there's some objective metric where we can decide the definition needs to be X. Like, I don't think that's going to
correct. Yeah. Which is why this is not a debate. It's a genuine discussion. Even though
no, we're debating. It's a debate. Don't worry.
Yeah, but it's not one of those debates.
When I use the word woke, what I'm really using it for, to be totally cards on the table, is I'm identifying the sector I think should be excised from a political party so that I can join it. If the woke were kicked off the Democratic side, I'd still be a Democrat probably.
Yep.
If the woke right were kicked off the right, I'd be a lot more comfortable in conservative circles than I currently am. And the problem I have with your definition is it excises Douglas Murray, but keeps the KKK member. The KKK member is delighted to talk about anything, but he's not censoring anybody. He'd love to have a very candid conversation with you, but Douglas Murray is the problem, and I just don't see it. I think the people I'm trying to excise from the right are the fucking fringe lunatics who are sneaking in total assaults on fundamental Judeo-Christian or classical liberal, whatever term we want to use, values, that if they are allowed to fester on the right, will do to the right what they did to the left, which is destroy it from within.
Okay. Let me respond to this very directly. My ability to criticize the freaks on the right. The freaks on the right come in many different flavors. Right?
What's your favorite?
Just because I call Rocky Road. Just because I call I couldn't think of Vanilla Ice. I don't know. They're more white. Yeah. Just because I label. Do you play video games at all? League of Legends.
I never fell down that particular cesspit, but yes.
But you understand the concept, okay.
We're old enemies.
League of Legends. There's five different enemies on the enemy team. You play MOBAs. Okay. There's 5 different enemies. Each of them are different. I have one word, woke, to describe the Douglas Murrays, the people who say I can't criticize Israel or criticizing Israel or Judaism or any of that makes you an anti-Semite or it should be implied that you're an anti-Semite. That's one type of person on the freak right. The woke right is one subset of the freak right. Then there are the red pill manosphere people who just hate women. I wouldn't call them woke. I would call them just fucking dweebs and losers, among other things. Then there are what's another faction on the right? The hardcore Christian fundamentalists. Are they woke? No, because woke is reserved for people who are censoring free speech. The Christian nationalists who, for example, want to use blasphemy laws to censor free speech, maybe I could call them woke, but they're not really using race and identity politics. They're using religion to censor free speech.
Well, they're using their identity as religion to censor.
Yeah, but then it's like, well, again, it's like, where are we going to draw the line about which identity? Like Christianity versus race versus whatever.
If I may, if I may, and I'm sorry for cutting you off, but I think that
You should be.
this
It's
is
making a
going to
great point.
be helpful to the conversation. Might be why I define it more broadly than you. The use case that
Okay.
I see, or not the use case, but the usefulness of using it as a more broad term, because I think that my definition, collectivism and identitarianism, that often but not always use grievance politics in order to attack classical liberal values, it showcases a much more wider umbrella that we can point to the ways of thinking that influence the behavior that we see on the ground. So that censoring that you were talking about is the symptom, right? But I'm identifying the root of the problem.
Okay. Right to that point, I don't think that that's necessarily a problem. You can collectivism in and of itself is not bad. We're social creatures. Everyone agrees. Like, we all agree in some level of collectivism, right? We all agree to abide by laws, to sacrifice some of our individual liberty to maintain the social order. That's what taxes are in a very, basic sense. Do we disagree to that?
I think we agree. I think that there is an interplay between ideas like state, patriotism, support your family, support your community.
Yep, collective identity.
That's reflective loyalty. And then, particularly in the American tradition, the paramount, you could even call it like holy value that we place on individial.
Which I think is wrong. I think our emphasis on the individual is a fatal mistake that is causing the problems that we have.
I disagree.
You might be woke.
But I've said I'm woke center. Jordan Peterson said, what's the classic Jordan Peterson line? Your rights are my responsibilities. There's no such thing as rights without the equivalent responsibilities. This is a point made by Viktor Frankl, who was a Austrian Jewish psychiatrist who survived the concentration camps. Right? He said the Statue of Liberty should be supplemented by the Statue of Responsibility because you cannot have one without the other. And individual liberty is dependent upon collective responsibility. You don't have any rights unless you live in a system that protects those rights. And you have a collective responsibility to that system
to ensure
some level of individualism.
Does the government give you those rights?
The government protects them, or should. A functioning government does. I don't know what that means, give them to me.
You're talking about what you were saying is that your rights don't exist without a system that protects those rights. And I don't think that's necessarily true. While a system might violate, or individuals or groups might violate your rights, I think your rights still exist. Even if the First Amendment didn't exist, for example, in America, I think free speech would still be a thing, and it would still be worth fighting for. It would still be a value.
I agree,
and a right.
But it would functionally not exist in a totalitarian free speech. If we lived in a censorship society, free speech would functionally not exist as a right. I would not have a right to come on and criticize the president or something.
It would
be
limited, but it still exists to some extent.
Okay, fine. My point is, my issue with your definition, Whick, is that because you're going after what you believe is the symptom, I think your definition is too expansive.
The cause.
Excuse me, the opposite. Yes, you're going after the cause. And I'm saying there's actually a lot of value that you are laying at the cause, and it's better to focus on the downstream symptom that is the problem. Call that, woke right or whatever, because then we can look at the cause and say, well, what are the valid points in this original cause that we could actually make use of?
Well,
we call that the woke right, we excise everyone.
You took a slice of my cause, and then you focused on that collectivism specifically, but it's not just collectivism. I don't disagree. Collectivism in and of and by itself is neutral. In my opinion, it's not good, it's not bad, it just is.
So is individualism.
I did tend to identitarianism, same thing. Though I tend to eschew identitarianism for other reasons. It's only when it's combined, right, with this attack on what I consider classical liberalism. And let me define that for you pretty simply for the sake of this discussion. Free speech, free trade, free elections. I think that's pretty standard.
I fucking hate classical liberalism if that's how we define it. I like the flowering of the Judeo-Christian. Free trade is the sacred religious thing. God, well, I'm not dying for free trade. I'll tell you that.
I mean, you'll die.
I'll die for free speech.
Well, no, hold on. The problem is like if goods don't cross borders, troops eventually will. So you're more likely to die without
no, I
free
don't think
trade
so.
than you are with.
I would
I wouldn't
respectfully
include.
disagree with that
I
assessment.
wouldn't include free trade.
Oh, okay.
I'm a free trade guy, but I wouldn't include free trade in
I'm not a
the
free
limited
trade guy.
definition. And the reason I wouldn't is because you talk about like root causes. What to me, what happened, and there's a lot of reasons why things got so crazy in 2020, but one of the reasons is that classical liberals have been absolute fucking pussies for a very long time. And it makes sense that they are because most classical liberal values are about not doing things, not rushing to judgment, not censoring speech, not having the government have X power and Y power.
Not restricting trade. Yes, I agree.
So there's a sense in which oftentimes classical liberals approach conversations and they're not being forceful. And what I think we need to start doing, and I think your focus takes us away from in a way that I don't find helpful, is identifying the difference between people who are adding to the American tradition. They're saying, okay, we have patriotism, we have classical liberalism, let's keep building, let's add to this. And people who are trying to knock the fucking tower down. And it's not a subtle distinction, because if you talk, like, again, I'll bring up the Christian nationalist example. If you talk to a Christian nationalist and they say something like, I think Christian morality is better, I think Christian morality is going to save the country, I'm going to go out and I'm going to organize people and we're going to get a lot of Christians in office, I have no problem with that. That's well within the bounds of classic liberalism. If they say, and that's why I support laws that create a religious test that you can only hold office if you're a Protestant. Now we have a problem because they're invading classical liberalism, and that I need classical liberals to step up to the plate and combat that because it's wrong. And I don't know that focusing only on silencing others gets there. I'm not saying they should lose their right to free speech. I'm saying they should be called a moron to their face. And
that's fine. Like I said, the analogy again. I feel like this whole discussion can be resolved if we just acknowledge the reality of there are 5 different types of enemies on the right. One of them is woke. One of them is freak misogynist. One of them is religious fundamentalist, evolution deniers. Whatever the other ones are. All I'm saying is I prefer to try to. It's literally, and this is just a. Like you want to bat a baseball bat that's 28 ounces and I want a 32 ounce bat. It's just like it's whatever our preference is at this point. Of like, I tend to think, and I would argue, given how much the fact that we're debating this, given that there's so much opposition to the term woke right, is evidence that the way that it's been used by people like Jim Lindsay and the way that you're using it means it's not a very good term. Whereas,
it's a great term. It's a great term because they
not
hate
in how
it.
it's being used.
They hate it so
that's not
much.
No, I wouldn't say that's a measure of a good term.
Well,
I don't think that's a measure of a good term.
It does, because the only use of the term woke is as a pejorative. That's what it's for. It's to shame people for having idiotic beliefs. Like, what else would it be?
Yeah, it exposes. I want to build off that real quick. It exposes hypocrisy. Woke, especially on the right, has become a boogeyman for a lot of people. They've opposed it for pretty good reasons, in my opinion.
Okay.
Right.
How about this?
If I may finish.
Go ahead. Sorry. Go ahead.
Right. And by evoking that term, they're holding a mirror to people's behaviors and saying, these things that you decried when the left was doing it, look what you've become. Look what you've become. I think that the danger, the pernicious danger specifically of those I would consider the woke right, the danger of this is that they have, and I think Jim Lindsay's just correct about this, they are doing what the woke left did, which was finding positions of influence and power within the structures that make up the right, MAGA, with a lot of MAGA and stuff, positions of influence and power, and they are using that to basically kick out everyone who's not them and invite their friends in. And they're going to do the same thing that the woke left did, which is create this system where if you do not play ball with them, they will be able to silence you. And it doesn't take a lot to do it. I'm not saying everyone on the right is woke. It's a very small amount. There's not a lot, right? But they're enough, and they're in positions of influence and power, and they're trying to get more, and it's a problem. Go ahead, you can try.
Can I play a 34-second clip and share my screen here?
Yeah, share your screen and we'll watch it.
This is, I should have shown this clip. This is, I want to make, share audio. I'm sure you guys have seen this.
You can just share your screen and or send it to me because I can't see it.
Also share system audio. Applications. Here we go.
Oh, we're doing that. Some other day, Paul, you and I should do political philosophy. It sounds like we actually have some interests in common.
Indeed. This, ladies and gentlemen, is the archetypal woke right, and there's nothing that is more of a mirror than this.
Anti-Semitism is not just an age-old prejudice. It is a contemporary crisis manifesting on campuses across the nation. It is not enough for individuals or institutions to merely claim they are not anti-Semitic. As my father once taught me, it is not enough for people, especially public figures, to be neutral or not be anti-Semitic. One must be anti-anti-Semitic. We must demand the same of our universities.
That's pretty woke. No, that's pretty woke.
That's
I don't
pretty
disagree.
fucking
That's
woke.
the woke right.
All right. I think we're all going to agree that's woke as hell.
Yeah, that's woke as hell.
And that is not coming from the left.
Oh, no. I think...
No, the left
where
does
is
it
it
too.
coming
Hold
from?
on, no, that's not true. The left does it too. It's not just enough to be silent when it comes to Israel-Palestine. You have to be anti-genocide. You have to be on the streets. And if
Sure,
you are
but
not
that-
anti-genocide, you are not an ally.
Yeah.
Look, it's
The
not
left-
enough. It's not enough.
Of
to
course,
be-
the left is
to be not
also
racist.
there
You
are
have to be
woke.
anti-racist.
Yes, there are woke
Yeah.
elements on the left, but I'm saying what we just saw is a rabbi that was invited to an anti-Semitism testimony by a Republican and who was Trump's Jewish prayer guy at the day of religious prayer. That guy is squarely on the right, and that is the most woke thing that any of us have ever seen, and he's on the right. And so
I totally
one
agree.
No,
equals.
we don't disagree. We
We all
disagree.
agree on this one. And I think that actually comparing this and the Murray clip is helpful because I was saying earlier, I think there needs to be some zone of discretion, some grace.
That's woke right.
You know? But like, obviously between what Murray said and what this guy said is an enormous gulf. So like,
True. Yeah, right.
I'm
You're
not
right.
sure where I would draw the line in between them. But there certainly is a line to be drawn there in my mind because that whenever you say if you're not with me, you're against me, you're starting to lean into woke territory.
Sure. I rest my case that the woke right exists.
I think we all agree the woke right exists.
No one disagreed. You've won the battle that no one was fighting, but you know what? That's okay. We're gonna get into the war.
Oh, I'm sorry. You're right. The woke right exists, and it's the people who use, in particular, the most relevant. Let me ask. Well, how about this is a more interesting question? What's the most relevant faction of the woke right? Because we agree that that's woke right. The people who use claims of anti-Semitism to silence people. That's one faction of the woke right. Then there's like you said, the Christian nationalists who think women shouldn't vote or whatever. Which of those two are more pertinent in our political situation?
Well, then I think you're also going to see like there's a species of race realist that is popping up.
Sure. Okay,
like,
them too. Which of
like,
those three?
I hate to throw one of the bus because he's sick and I love Dilbert and I'd love to talk to him about one of his books. But when Scott Adams said like white people should get the hell away from black people, for example, like that strikes me as fairly woke.
Yeah, that's an example of something that I would call it's a little as racist. Now, again, I'm even hesitant to use the word because I feel like I'm now a leftist. Well, that's racist.
Well, I mean, wait, are you saying that you're suspicious of something
Hold on.
that Douglas Adams said? That
Right, totally.
That sounds awfully woke to me.
Well, but I also okay. Hold on. I asked you a question.
Yeah.
Between all of those different factions of the woke right, in my mind, it's very clear that the one directly in power, directly in Donald Trump's ear, the one who is deporting students for criticizing Israel, the one who is in the testimony saying exactly verbatim Ibram X's talking points, that is the more relevant and more dangerous woke faction that should be focused on. And it's useful to have a term that narrows it down to that, because those other factions, while I agree are dangerous and will only continue to get more dangerous, currently And I would say those other factions are dangerous, but if our freedom of speech gets taken away, that's the worst. That's not the worst thing that could happen. It's one of the worst things that could happen. Far more than what the idea that women are going to lose the right to vote. Like half this country's women. Do we think it's a real possibility that those Christian nationalists are going to remove the rights of women to vote within the next 100 years?
Within the next
200?
It's hard to prognosticate, but I think it's a real risk depending on what happens.
Of course, it's always a real risk.
Within the next, I want to say 10 years.
Which is more likely? That the Trump administration continues to censor people for criticism of Israel under the defense of protecting Jewish students or whatever, or identity, and fighting anti-Semitism, or the Christian nationalists eliminating the right of women to vote. Which of those is more likely?
Again, I'm not gonna argue with you. I think
wisely, because if you answered it honestly, you would lose the debate.
Administration is the greatest free speech threat to free speech we've seen in over a generation. But it's not just on the anti-Semitic front. It's on a whole host of fronts. They're attacking lawyers and law firms that have represented clients that Trump doesn't like. They're revoking their security clearances, banning them from buildings, from federal government buildings, banning them from doing their job, right? So anti-Semitism is just a small sliver of that, right?
Sure.
So this is why I think that the narrowing it down too narrow, it runs the risk of like people on the left saying, well, we can't talk about the problems of the left now because the right is a much bigger threat. And so we just need to not talk about these other problems right now.
I agree. Look, nobody believes that we should be able to talk about threats as they are. That's fine. We can sit here and agree all day that the people who the red pill manosphere, we hate women crowd, the people who encourage people to never marry, fuck as many women as you can, never marry all lying bitches.
Did you see Andrew Wilson?
That's insane.
Andrew Wilson said he would give me $20,000 to box him for 3 rounds.
I did see that. Oh, he fucking better. I'll message him.
Look, he hasn't responded. And at this point, frankly, the date I gave him, I'm going to have to push it back because I started making plans because I think he pussed out, right? But like, I am absolutely willing. We just got to get a date, like a solid date. And he just has to give me the money. Put it in escrow or something, right? Put it in escrow. But I would love that opportunity, please.
I would, trust me, I'd love to see that.
Fundamentally, I don't think that this, like you said earlier, the distinctions we're drawing are somewhat fine lines, and because it's a term that doesn't have an objective meaning, I'm not sure it's possible to even convince each other of the point. I do think, though, there is a danger in it specifically in the way you are using it. Like, for example, we're going to talk about Zionists, we're going to talk about support of Israel, and we're not going to talk about great replacement theory when we're talking about woke. That seems odd because there's a whole slew.
What is great? Okay, again, then we have to get into it. What is great replacement theory? The idea that the browning of America, which was the talking point of the Democrats for like the last 20 years, demographics is destiny. That's a left-wing talking point.
Well, it's and a right-wing talking point.
So you're saying the great replacement theory is the idea that Jews are specifically doing it to fucking take out white people. No. Fine.
For example, if someone said he should end birthright citizenship.
I think we should end birthright citizenship.
White people are going to be replaced by brown people. That doesn't strike you as woke?
I don't think it's any more woke than saying, in America,
think we should end birthright citizenship?
Yeah, but I'm not sold on it.
Let him cook.
Okay, go ahead.
Well, first off, we're one of how many countries that do it? Almost every nation does not do it. It's a separate issue. I'm not sold on that.
We are exceptional in many ways.
True, and exceptionally bad in others. But the idea of is Ireland for the Irish? Is saying that Ireland should be majority Irish people? Is that woke?
I think that in the American tradition, and I'm speaking about the American tradition,
right?
If you take the position that America is for a specific demographic, that strikes me as pretty woke.
Not asking. I agree. I'm asking you, but is it okay for white Irish people to say that Ireland should be for the Irish, and we want our country to be majority white Irish? Is that appropriate?
I think it's shitty for them to do it. However,
you think it's shitty?
Looking at the UK recently,
Yeah.
I am counting my blessings that we deviated from their roots when we founded America, because they are abandoning classical liberal principles faster than I can count. Like,
I
it is a shit show over
Hold on,
there.
hold on. I want to
What
continue.
is
on.
Irish?
I would
No,
very
hold on.
much.
That's fair. One sec. Do you believe that it would? Do you think it's also shitty for Japanese people to say we want the island of Japan to be the majority of Japanese like people?
I
Is that
do
also
think it's
shitty?
shitty, but I also don't think that Japan's been really great about classic liberalism throughout its history.
Hold on, I'm just
I'm
asking
trying
you.
to defend something that is uniquely American. So I don't. I like
Okay,
the,
but do
the
you?
fact that
Okay,
other countries don't have this value that I'm trying to defend isn't really my concern,
do you
because they
think
haven't
they're
had the value.
worse? Do you think they're okay? But hold on. Do you? I'm asking you if this is a good philosophical debate about what woke is. I agree that in America, where there is no racial, essentialist component to it. And I, as an American, this is God's true chosen country. I'm better than everyone. I know that. But I also am like, if Japan wants Japan to be mostly Japanese, I'm actually not in a position to say that that's wrong. Even it's wrong for America. Is it wrong for Japan to do it for the Japanese to do it in Japan?
You asked me about like a moral claim.
Yeah. Yes. Philosophically, morally, you think it's wrong?
Yes, but I mean, we're going to go deep waters if we do this. I'm a
Do you
natural.
think? All right, hold on. I'll ask you.
Yeah,
Okay,
I'm
I'll
a
ask
natural law theorist.
you.
So
Okay.
the idea would be that I think there are actually objective moral standards that can be discovered.
Okay.
The issue with that is that not all groups of people have. So something can be wrong without it violating a cultural convention. I'm not sure it violates a cultural convention in the history of Japan to want Japan to be majority Japanese.
So now
that doesn't make it right.
This speaks to our fundamental philosophical difference because, and I'm evolving. I just posted a conversation today with FT signifier. Whick, you know who that is. In fact, I believe the first time I realized that FD knew who I was on your show.
True.
Was when he mentioned it. And FD is very race conscious, and I was our conversation we had is that I'm becoming more sympathetic and understanding of collective identity, and like if I was Irish, which I am, genetically I'm a European mutt. I actually
No, does
someone
that
told
make
me
you
that
Irish? Does having Irish blood make you Irish?
I don't know. It's a great question. It's an open ended question that we should be talking about. Maybe I don't know.
I
don't
say
know.
that
We
that's
should
like
have
blood quantum type of deal, right? Like you have to have so much.
Do you say the same thing about Israel? Do you think that Israel should not be a Jewish state?
An ethnostate, you mean? I think that it should not be an ethnostate, and nor do I
So
think
you think-
Palestine should be an ethnostate. I don't
Right,
think a
so-
lot
okay,
of the
so-
Arab world should be ethnostates. I don't think Japan should be an ethnostate. I don't think that Ireland or something.
So you think that to the degree that Israel takes steps to maintain a majority Jewish population, that's racist?
That's bad. Yes.
Bad. Okay. That is that was my opinion for a while, and I still think is my opinion.
Mm.
However, I am becoming more sympathetic to the fact of, all right, when I hear the pro-Zionists talk about, well, there's something important about having a Jewish state. The ethno-state itself is not even necessarily the problem. It's how they fucking went about it, expelling all the Palestinians and now fucking massacring them.
If you let
But in
everyone
principle-
have
in
the same
principle-
rights, it doesn't matter, right?
I don't think every country in the world should be like America, where it's all multiracial and all that.
I
I
do.
think it's actually okay. That's fine, but there's no way to adjudicate who's correct on here other than a philosophical difference. And it's a totally different debate. And this is my point.
Lockheed Martin will.
The
solve our
classical
problems
liberals,
with this.
the
They'll
Douglas
end it.
Murrays, you're correct. True, Mike makes right. The Douglas Murrays, the James Lindsays will say anyone who wants an ethno-state is wrong. And people who care about their collective identity are wrong. I will tell you, here's my most racist woke opinion. Are you ready? I think that if America had no white people in it, that would kind of fucking suck. I would prefer that America has some white people in it. Is that racist?
Can I ask
Yeah,
you
I'm
a question as a follow up?
No, hold on. No, wait, hold on. Ryan, is that racist or woke?
I didn't find it that way. No, I think that
But it's entirely. That's
Hold
such
on,
a
I
collective.
gotta ask this before I forget.
Yeah.
Before I forget. And let me read a couple super chats too. $20 from Grassroots Hegemon to say the term is good because it does what it is intended. Thank you for the $20. $10 more from our favorite Hegemon, the Grassroots Hegemon, to say, why should I agree to co-sign living with people who did openly massacre members of my community? Why would I do that? Thank you for the $10. Let me ask a question. What makes someone, I'm going to use British. What makes someone British? Is it
It's a great
because they
question that I do
have
not have a good answer to.
British blood? If you had a son, okay, you have two people. You have a son of your blood, and you have a son you adopted.
Yeah.
The son you adopted doesn't look or resemble anything like you. Different parents entirely. You have no blood relation. However, they grow up to be the true radical centrist. They adopt your values, your beliefs, your morals, and they preach them and they live them, and they are your belief system made personified. Okay, but they don't show any of your blood. Now your blood son is a communist. Okay, he believes in
God,
the
or worse, a woke right Douglas Murray fan.
woke Zionist commie. Okay, he's a Zionist commie who
Zionist
thinks we
commie.
should glass Gaza, all the terrible things, right?
Which one is
but
more
he's
my
of your
son?
blood. Which one is more your son?
I don't know how to answer that question.
I do. It's the one that shares
Which one
your
would
values.
which one would I love more?
No, not which
The
one you would
radical
love
centrist,
more.
obviously.
Which one is more your son? I'll die on this hill. It's the one that shares your values. It's the one that shares your beliefs.
That's actually a very odd definition of family, because you could easily say that the thing about family is that even if my brother, it deviates from me entirely, we're still family, and I still owe an allegiance to him that I would owe no one else, despite him having entirely different political disagreements. And people would say that's what actually makes family valuable to begin with. So you have I think that's a definition of family that is odd and unusual
back
and
up a
not
little
very
bit?
good.
Earlier, I was talking about kind of like stacking political beliefs,
Yeah.
right? So you have kind of like, let's call it like blood and soil. It's religion, it's nationalism, it's patriotism, it's community.
Yeah.
Every society is based on this and must be, because if you don't have that value system, you don't get to be a group of people. You'll just be conquered by somebody who does have that value.
Correct.
System. It's a necessity. And then on top of that, we built in classic liberalism and this, the individual. And there is an interplay there. Like, I don't think the draft was wrong, even though it was a massive imposition on individual rights. Because if you don't, at certain points, prioritize your country, you don't get to have one anymore.
Correct.
So there could be situations where the draft is okay, even though it is a massive violation of individual. So when I look at a country like Israel and Japan, and I was being a little glib earlier, but you asked, like, how do they? That's what I thought about these countries having rules about demographics. Israel is in a very different situation. Like, its demographics are part of its defense mechanism at this point.
Yeah.
Because if it didn't have them, it would just cease to be a country. And I think what Whick was saying is an important overlay, which is about sharing values. Like, there's nothing to me about classic liberalism that requires you to import a voting population that will vote Sharia law into existence.
Correct.
If you actually have to know what your values are and say, you can come here, but you must assimilate. It's not the other way around. We're not going to let you undermine classic liberalism with your Sharia law nonsense. It's not.
That's your You have a collective identity. It is liberalism.
Of course, but I think it's layered on top of each other. And my issue with the issue with the woke isn't that they recognize the need for collectivism on some level. It's that they want to upset the app. They want to knock down the whole Jenga tower. When you talk to someone on the woke left, they use their grievance to say we should get rid of the Constitution. We should put discrimination into law. We should be allowed to discriminate against white people to even the scales against the things that happened to black people historically. And that's my concern on the woke right. I honestly, maybe I'm just insensitive. I don't really care if someone tries to silence me that much. What I care about is whether they're going to actually attack the value system that makes the country what it is.
Sure, I guess I don't disagree. I don't know. I don't disagree.
There's a lot there. I wonder and I worry that we have replaced like this aesthetic of what an American is, right? with the actual value system of America. And I want to do a show on this later. And when Eucharist gets back to me, my friend Professor Button, right? When he gets back to me, I want to have him on because he teaches political theory and stuff like that at a college. I want to talk about what it means to be an American, right? Because that's the big topic right now. What does it mean to be American? An immigrant. We are a nation of immigrants, I would argue. We came over from Europe, fleeing religious persecution and religious intolerance. And we founded a nation, as we have talked about, based on classical liberal values that has evolved over time to be what it is today. And I think that we are in danger now of losing what it means to be an American because so many people are looking at the aesthetics of it. You're only American if you, for example, speak English, look white. And I don't agree. And that's a
correct. Yeah, is Kanye West not an American? Whatever Kanye West is, which he's many things, he's definitely an American. I'll tell you
American, that. Unfortunately, America is good and bad, right? But it's one of those things. Is there anything else that either?
What do you think of my statement that if America had no white people in it, I think that would kind of suck?
I mean,
that would kind of suck.
I don't think it would matter, honestly, right? If I was let me ask you this.
Wait, then you wouldn't be here. So
no,
at least on
no,
that
my
level,
identity isn't
right?
tied to my whiteness. If I was brown, I would still be Whick. Wait, do you disagree?
You are white, so in this example, you'd be deported. You obviously that's a bummer for you, right?
Look, no. It depends. Are you snapping your fingers and turning everyone?
I know it's a bad hypothetical because what do I mean? How did we get there? All the different things.
For example, that's why it strikes me as bad because how you get there is grim.
Well, no, look, if someone Thanos stabbed and we all became black, I okay.
Sure. Right? Yeah. Okay. Okay. Let me.
If they went around and killed everyone who was white, obviously I would have a problem.
Right. And I will admit I am split on this issue. Like, for example, I would have no problem marrying a black woman or a Mexican woman or something like that and having mixed race kids, right? And so the woke right would say I'm a fucking race traitor and all that. And I think they're a bunch of virgins. That's fine. I don't care. But like, I also, someone commented this that I think illustrates it the best. It's basic game theory. It's like, I am willing to, of course, I like being in a multiracial nation. But that only works when everyone plays by the same rule, which is ultimately we should treat everyone like an individual. Mm-hmm. But if if demographics continue to go down the direction they're going down, and it's like, okay, Mexicans can have Mexican pride, blacks have black pride, all these different racial groups have their own pride that is race-based. But then the white whatever.
To be clear,
group,
I don't like those types. I think those are self-defeating and bad.
Yeah,
and we should.
And you're a white racist, so I don't care what your opinion is, and neither do they. I'm using the woke tactics to show you how that would play out.
Silence.
But it's game theory. It's like, well, I can't. If my collective identity is liberalism, and liberalism involves treating everyone like an individual, how can you be liberal with people who don't believe in liberalism? Like you said, the Sharia law thing, right?
This is actually, it's funny. This is like a fight I'm currently having with Pisco, and we're going to be continuing it in the next time I go on his stream, where I said like one of my problems with the Biden administration is that they were essentially instituting into law racial preferences and supporting that in a number of areas. You saw a lot of policies that were favoring people on the basis of race and defending the use of race at Harvard, for example. And I do think that's a problem. I think that you have to, and I think classic liberals need to be forceful about this, because otherwise you let bad actors take over the stage. Like, you need to say, no, like, I'm not doing the mental gymnastics. The rule is you treat everyone as an individual, and the government cannot treat people differently on the basis of race.
Yeah, but no, it's not the government. I'm asking, like, what if people came in and said, I'm not going to treat people as, see, this is the problem. I'm not debating so much as I'm thinking out loud, because it's hard to articulate the issue. It's like, what, like you said, what makes an American? What's an American identity? It's like, is an American just someone who comes here and abides by our laws and believes in the rule of law?
It shares our values, I would argue.
Okay, but I agree with that, but the problem is I think values go beyond just laws.
I don't disagree.
And it goes into things like art and stories and like culture.
Yes and no. I
Oh,
think
This is my point.
it totally does. This is why the
Like, can you
hold on.
be
No
woke left
story?
attacks on like
I
Jefferson.
think no. It's important to be clear. To be very clear here. I'll try to be concise with this. But stories and art are a way we convey and tell our values. I don't know if they are our values.
Yeah, but even like
you understand the difference. It's a tool rather than the thing.
correct. But like, for example, if someone doesn't know the story of the Good Samaritan, does that not? I mean, it's like, again, there's people who are listening who don't know the story.
No.
You can always come up with an example.
When the left was tearing down statues of Thomas Jefferson.
Yeah, right.
That's a very big deal to me because it is very difficult to understand what American values are if you do not have a healthy respect, if not veneration, for Thomas Jefferson. Like that's where the values came from. So if you're going to tear down the founders, yes, I do.
Well,
think
this is why I am sympathetic to just like I'm sympathetic to many ideas in Marxism, and just like I'm sympathetic to many ideas in the Enlightenment, I'm sympathetic to some ideas in Christian nationalism, which is like, for example, I think we should emphasize. I do think that America is fundamentally, like you said, it's classical liberalism is the flowering of a Judeo-Christian tradition, but I think that flower is not enough as we've seen it unravel, and I think it actually needs to be grounded in more things that are more explicitly Christian. As someone who is not explicitly Christian, I think, for example, like Christmas should be a national holiday, but like Hindu and Muslim holidays should not. I believe in that. That's probably one of my most right-wing beliefs, if I say that.
Like, so specifically, you think that a Hindu national holiday should never be made, or should never be made in America.
I'm saying in Christmas, like Christmas is not just one holiday; it's a whole season of like people take off of work, all kinds of shit. People gather. It's like, and you can't do. There's only so much time in the year where you can do that.
It's a cultural thing, yeah.
Right. So I'm saying I think it is the primacy of Christmas, which was originally a Christian holiday. Obviously, it's been consumerized up the wazoo, but in principle, its roots are a Christian thing. Hence Christmas. I think it's good, and it should be, and it is an American thing that is the holiday we venerate, and not a Hindu or a Muslim holiday.
I don't.
And if we switched it where we put those on the same parity, or we made Christmas not as much of a federal holiday or something like that, or whatever, and all the cultural norms around it, because it's just 1 or 2 days from a federal holiday, but all of the norms around it are these amorphous things that agree that it's like a culturally venerated tradition. I think it's good that it's Christmas and not some Hindu thing, because I don't think the Hindu values, like having a caste system, are very conducive to American values. Am I wrong?
You're not wrong. Let me read the super chat real quick. Then
but
I'll
I sure sound racist, don't
I? No, I don't think it's racist. I do think it's misguided and wrong, and I'll explain why after I read these super chats.
Okay.
$20 from Alexander Rind to say Irish and Japanese aren't just citizenships; they're ethnic identities. You don't become Irish or Japanese just by getting a passport. American, on the other hand, is a civic identity, not an ethnicity. Alexander, I agree with you as it is, but I don't know if that ought be so. I don't think it should matter, but that's just me. It's a longer discussion. We'll have another day. $20 from Crash Out or Cash Out to say, let's get woke. You could argue that most groups of people are, at the root, conservative and similar, and the division from that is more tied to racial divide, racism, and DEI alike. Your idea stinks of white is right. I think that's your idea, but I'm not sure. It might be mine.
Which idea? Yeah, I was going to say,
you gotta be more specific.
Mine?
I'm not sure. Well, Crash Out or Cash Out? Which idea specifically? You got to be more specific. But to answer your
donate
question,
another $5 so we don't read it.
Yeah, to answer your question, or to contend with your statement, it wasn't really a question. It was more of an assertion. I don't know if that's true. I think on a cultural level, yes, the culture would be different if we had another holiday other than Christmas. Though this gets into a really hard conversation between culture and values. I think different cultures can share values, and I think that they do. I wouldn't say that American culture is the same as British culture, but we both share a holiday in Christmas.
And your analogy earlier of the two sons, right? The adopted son that doesn't
Yes,
have
yes.
genes but shares your values, and your flesh and blood son who does not. And I think that's a perfect illustration of the classical liberal mindset, because it makes sense rationally. I don't have kids, so it's it's a
Me neither.
the
but,
the very right the very. Do you have kids, Ryan?
I do.
How do you feel about that analogy of the adopted kid versus flesh and
I
blood kid?
think I do not have any adopted children. I don't know what that would be like.
That's
It is
fair.
difficult for me to imagine caring about someone who is not my flesh and blood the way I care about my kids.
Now that is entirely a vibes-based phenomenon that is very real and foolish to deny. And I think, Whick,
I'm not denying that happens. I'm just saying it's not necessarily a good thing that it does. So, for example,
maybe
look, there are a lot of natural things that just, when I see a pretty girl, I want to kiss her. But if I just went and kissed her without consent, without any of that,
sure,
that's
very different from
bad.
loving your flesh and blood child, despite the fact
I think
that
you should love
they
everyone
have different values.
regardless, right?
No, you should love your own family more than your neighbors.
Yeah, you definitely should. This is, I think,
disagree with that.
I don't agree with
This
that.
is one of the things.
No, Whick.
I don't.
No, Whick, come on, man.
Look,
Come on.
I understand that
you
you're
start hosting dating shows, Whick.
Hold on.
Whick,
Let's
we
talk.
need to
Hold
get you
on.
there.
Let me
We need to
explain. Let me elaborate.
we need
Let me
to
explain. Let me explain.
Brain rot today. Now we're doing left-wing brain
Okay,
rot.
let me
be knocking up some girl and having a bunch of Whick kids. Little Wickers.
Let me explain what I mean, right? I think that one has a responsibility to their family that they do not have to others, right? I have a what is it? Fiduciary, not fiduciary. Familial family responsibility. I have a responsibility and a duty to my family, to my mom, to my sister, to my brother, to my girlfriend, to my wife, to my husband, right? I have a different duty to them than I do to a random stranger down the street, right? But that isn't because we share blood. Does that make sense?
Okay. No, here's what I'm saying.
Wick,
it's not.
I'm just gonna be,
do you share blood with your husband or wife?
I love Wick. I love you. I love coming on your show. I consider you a friend. Paul, I just met you. You seem nice. We did a trolley problem where it was you and everybody you guys know on one side and one of my daughters on the other. My daughter's going to survive every single
because
time.
You have a different responsibility.
It wouldn't even be close. I wouldn't think about it that hard. Like, I mean, it would be very obvious what I would do.
And I would argue that is the correct and moral way to, because you might say, well, how could it possibly be moral to put the lives of one person over 100? It's because that's the operative. How do I say this? That's the software that needs to run in order for societies to be successful. Everyone needs to take care of their own first.
And that's exactly what Israel is doing.
Yes. No. Yes.
Fine.
Yes.
But that's wrong and bad. And
I have a problem with them.
Horrible,
I have a problem with them.
No. It's not like this is what I was saying before about the tower, which I keep coming back to. The base of the tower is blood, soil, family, community, religion. Like if you don't have ties that bind locally, you don't get to have a nation anymore. Because somebody who has those things will kill you and take it from you. Because you need those things for collective defense. You need it.
You were mistaking. You're mistaking love and responsibility, and they're not the same.
I think you are pretending. I think you are. You're not. I'm not pretending. I think you're assuming they're different when they're not.
You're killing me, man. This is the thing that the woke left did that drove me fucking crazy. Because they would say things like, no offense, Wick, like, you should treat all human lives as you're indifferent to them morally. They're all the same. It's all utilitarian calculus. And that sort of idea undermines the kind of common sense understanding of what a society is. And it's just like when it drove me fucking crazy when the left does it. We're here to talk about how it drives me crazy when the right does it, and it does, but it drives me crazy either way.
If you were let me ask you a hypothetical.
The avatar of the woke left.
Let me ask you both a hypothetical. You're walking down the street, and you're passing a lake. In that lake,
and I run into Douglas Murray. I go, listen here.
In that lake, there is, you don't know them, There is
Yeah.
someone's child, not yours, is drowning. Do you have a responsibility? Do you feel you have a responsibility? Say you're an accomplished swimmer. You're pretty no danger of drowning yourself, right? There's not alligators or sharks or anything. There's no danger. Do you have a responsibility to rescue that
Yes.
child?
Yes.
Well, sorry, legally or morally?
Morally.
Right?
I'm talking
Morally,
morally.
yes.
Legally, I don't.
You,
I don't
hold
know.
on. Same question, Wick.
Legally,
Child's in a-
no, which is weird, but yeah.
Child's in a burning building, and you might die if you go in it, and you're a parent yourself.
I do
You
think
have an
that
obligation to go in there?
if you have a good chance, I think you have moral responsibility. If you are
50-50.
weak and 50-50 is not enough. So I'll the same thing. If
Hold
I
on,
came
hold on. But
across,
if it's your own child, you go in if it's 5%.
how many other
Correct?
children do you have?
That's a good question.
And that gets harder.
Yeah,
But
like
That's a great
right,
question.
right.
I
Like
think-
it depends. It's context dependent. But my point here is, and the reason I'm saying, and what I mean
question.
by you should love everyone, right, and you should treat everyone as much as you can as family, is I think the world
No.
becomes a better. Let me explain.
Wrong.
The world becomes a better place, and I'll tell you why.
This is woke left.
Because people will. I want to live in a world where someone won't hesitate if my child is drowning to save them, even if they don't know
Same.
them. And
I
think
don't
we
want to
get
live in a
that
world. I don't
better
want to live.
by treating
I don't want to.
everyone as family,
No,
or as much.
I
as
don't
you
want
can.
to. I don't want to live in a world where I'm expected to love other people's kids as much as my own, or show the same level of responsibility to my own family.
I'm not
or,
asking for
to
the
others'
same level of
families.
responsibility. I never asked for that.
Okay, then. All right.
I don't think you
now
should
that
be required to pay money to.
I think we've exhausted this part of the discussion
fair
because
enough.
now it's just like, what do you mean by love and responsibility? I think the responsibility comes from love, but whatever. The point is, we should have a white ethnostate where only rich white landowning males can vote. It's very simple.
That seems like where we were going.
It's called a syllogism. Ready? I love my children. White ethnostate.
And women are subservient, obviously, second class. There to.
I'm actually
make
a
babies.
feminist white ethnostate person. I think it actually should be
We're gonna
rich
fight on
landowning
that.
females.
Yeah, he's actually advocating for a matriarchal society. It's just white matriarchal society.
The den mother.
Wick, I got to roll it in 20 minutes.
Yeah,
just
you know,
FYI. Just given the.
we're wrapping up. We're wrapping up.
Yeah, I think it is important to fight against the idea that you owe people love. I think you owe people that you treat them as individuals.
Versus should.
That's what we owe. That's what we owe each other. And by the way, treating someone as an individual might mean that you treat them quite poorly. Because if someone behaves poorly and you're treating them as an individual, you will treat them poorly in return. Like I don't. The idea that we owe each other love is, I think, too much.
Agreed.
I think
the title of this stream will be Wick reveals he is the woke left.
The woke left. It might be a woke position, and the question becomes, how many beliefs do you have to have that are woke to that makes you woke? I don't think one counts. I think it needs to be a system.
It's so funny because Wick and I probably, if you just like lined up our political beliefs, we would disagree more than we agree on policies and law and all kinds of different things. But I'm normally on his side in arguments and debates because the attacks on classic liberalism and classic liberal values have gotten so extreme, and we both agree on that. So I'm constantly coming to Wick's defense on his show or on X or wherever, because the lunatics are, just out in force saying, well, that's why we should get rid of due process. And it's like, all right, guys, like you're off the team. I'm sorry, you're off the team.
The other example I wanted to bring up earlier, I don't know what you guys think of this. Again, to the point of the different, like, well, who shares my values more? It's like, well, a woke left white progressive in California does not share my values nearly to the degree as, I don't know, some
German,
moderately Christian Italian or some shit. I don't know.
Sure.
And yet when the LA fires burned through LA, I was like, yep, my tax dollars should go to them. They're my fellow Americans. I don't care if they share my values. Like, those are my countrymen. Whereas if like a fire is ripped through Italy or something, I'd be like, if we have money to spare, I suppose, but we do not have the same obligation to those people as we do. I do not have the same obligation as a taxpayer to them as I do to my fellow countrymen, even if I think my fellow countrymen are fucking stupid. Now, I have made the analogy before of like, I would gladly deport 10,000 white college-age Marxists and replace them with 10,000 Cuban Christians or something like that, who hate communism and appreciate American values more. And I still think that, but every day I'm evolving. I think we have to take seriously the same reason that causes people to love their own children more than others simply just gets extended outwards to like, well, I love my own neighbors and then my own city and then my own state. And then there is, I think, a like lineage element to that of like genetic lineage and race. Like that is an element to that. Now, I think it's absolutely, the God's chosen people American way of viewing things to say, well, we're all part of the same human, race. It's like black people who've been in America are as much American as certainly anyone else. And it's like, where you draw the boundaries of race and where you draw the boundaries of a lineage, it's like, again, the reason I'm sympathetic to Christian nationalism is Christianity did this exact thing. It said we're all children of God. We're all part of the same race and tribe. It's like, and I think the reason it was successful is because it capitalized on that underlying psychological mechanism. But we have to then acknowledge there's a real psychological mechanism there. And then the question is, well, okay, if we're not going to call ourselves a Christian nation, and we're not going to use Christianity to bind everyone together, and we're going to instead use like classical liberalism or whatever, it's like, okay, well then how do we make the justification that we're all God's children if there is no, or if we don't acknowledge a God? It's like these are difficult and complicated questions that I don't know the answer to. All I know is that in order to be able to think, you must risk being offensive. And if you want to call me woke or racist for saying that, I would call you woke.
Okay. Everyone, that's PF Young. Thank you for coming to this show. Thank you for
famed race-conscious white guy, PF Young.
Thanks for being here. Where can people find you? I have a link to his stuff in my YouTube description, by the way. So if you want to find him and
I prefer that your audience does not come out and filth up my channel. Your audience of woke center or woke whatever. You have an audience of woke leftists, and I don't want them anywhere near my channel. I only want brilliant people like FD Signifier's fans who call me a quirked up white boy, and Destiny's fans who call me all manner of slurs. That's the only people I want on my channel. No, I'm kidding. PFJUNG. It's in the stream. It's in the description.
Check him out, gang. Click that link. Give him a sub. Give him a follow. Give him whatever he needs. Thank you for being here. And Ryan, what about you? Where can people find you?
Great conversation and unexpected segue at the end there. That is the exact political question I spend a lot of time trying to solve on X, which is what does it mean to believe in human rights, to believe in natural rights, to believe in natural law? And how can you possibly understand what America is without believing in those things? The spoiler is I'm not sure you can, but that's something I spend a lot of time talking about. You can find me on X with my unpronounceable and unspellable last name, Ryan C. Mullally, with 4 L's in it.
4 L's, not 3, not 5, but 4. Make sure you count to 4.
It's a total brand risk.
And with that,
the L's are only in his last name. He's got W's everywhere else.
True. Okay, I'm going to move them out. We're not ending the stream, but I'm going to talk to you, chat, and yell at you a bit and read their super chats, but I will let these people fly free. I'm not going to hold them hostage. I'm not Hamas, right? But I'll let them fly free. I'll see you guys later. Bloop.
Yeah.
Bloop. Okay. Friends, foes, and enemies. Let's read these super chats, and then I'll kind of give my closing thoughts here, uninterrupted by those weaker intellects. Okay. Alexander Wren for $5 says, at Whick TV, I speak of what is, not what should be. Yes, the is ought. Difference. $5 more from Alexander Wren says, blood is and will always be thicker than water. We'll talk about that. $10 from Grassroots Hegemon. So tempted to throw the dog wars question in here. true. $10 more from Crash Out or Cash Out says the black community was originally conservative and believed in a nuclear family. The racism is what caused the separation from that. The idea America's white culture and separating from it is wrong equals what? And then $20 from Grassroots Hegemon to say P.F. Young is easily my favorite Hitler enthusiast. Look, P.F. Young's a bit of a quasi memer. And what I mean by that is he does a thing I like to call kidding on the square. It's where you're kidding, you're joking around, you're joshing around, but there's seriousness in there. You actually mean what you're saying, but you do so in a humorous tone, using humorous different ways of getting your point across. So, yeah. Good guy. I like him. I like talking to these people. I like talking to people I disagree with. I disagree with P.F. Young a lot, honestly. But that's okay. I still love him. And we still are happy to have him on the show. Oh boy, oh boy, oh boy. Oh boy, oh boy, oh boy. Okay, so yeah, maybe I need to have a talk with you guys about, I don't know, values. A lot of you got mad at my family take. Look, I think you have a responsibility to your family that you do not have to other people. That's true. But I think when it comes to who should you love, you should love everyone. I think that. Like, there's a reason that religions, for a long time, at least Christianity, called each other brother and sister. Even if they weren't members of the same blood, the same tribe, the same family. They called each other brothers and sisters. Brother Joe, sister Sally, right? And they'd use those terms in the church to denote this idea that they were part of a larger whole, God's family, if you will, that we were all children of God in a real way. And perhaps it's my Christian upbringing, but I still believe that. I think that you should love others as you love yourself, as you love, everyone can love. You should love your enemies, gang. You should. But you can disagree if you like. That's what I think. That's what I think. Okay, what do we got coming up? I'll tell you. Okay, I'll tell you what we got coming up. Tomorrow I'm taking the day off because I want to take the day off. I want to get some stuff done. But, and oh man, I don't want to... I worry that I'm going to spoil the announcement or whatever, but I'm going to say it anyway. So I was invited to go on Tim Pool tomorrow, but I couldn't because I had taken the day off. I had made other plans. I had other things going on, right? So I couldn't make it. But I did recommend, and I think they took my recommendation. Not So Erudite's going to go on Tim Pool tomorrow. And that should be fun. The topic... I am not sure what it is. I think it's why are men leaving the left or something. And I'm not entirely sure of her interlocutor. But yeah, so check her out. I hope I didn't spoil that announcement for her. I was waiting for her to say it before I said anything, but the hour is late. And, well, is what it is. And hopefully that goes... Oh, you saw that already? So she did announce it? Good. She announced it yesterday. I didn't see it yesterday. But anyway, yeah. I got her that gig. Okay. So you're welcome. It should be fun. I'm happy for her. I wanted to give her that boost. Oh, she mentioned it on Live and Learn. That's very cool. That's very cool. So yeah, check that out tomorrow. It will be a fun time. Next week we have a full schedule. Tuesday, we're going to have the great titty debate, okay? Boobs in games. Cringe or based. Gooning in games. Should games be made for gooning? We're going to have Mooncake on. We're going to have the Lost Lore Scholar on to debate. It should be fun. Tuesday, the great titty debate. It's gonna be. I'm excited to make the thumbnail for it. but it should be fun. If SFO wants to come on and talk about titties with us, he's more than invited. In fact, I'll send him an invite, see if he wants to come and join us. That should be fun. I wonder if JMac wants to too. I should ask him. I saw part of his show today. I saw part of his D&D game. I didn't see it all, but the part I saw seemed fun. Let's see. Wednesday. I'm not sure what I got going on. I think I have something, but I'd have to double check. Oh yeah, Wednesday we're going to talk about race swapping. Wednesday we're going to talk about the controversy, quote unquote, where Hermione Granger in the new HBO TV series of Harry Potter is being played by a slightly darker skinned girl. And people are up in arms. And we'll be talking to people who think that that's a bad thing. I don't care. And I think that anyone who does care is weird. Just like I think it's okay when they cast someone to be the Prince of Persia, Jake Gyllenhaal, I think it wasn't Persian. That's okay. That's okay to do, right? It's okay to cast people who aren't specifically the race or ethnicity of the character. Unless, and the only reason this might be a problem, unless the race or ethnicity of the character is important to the story, which sometimes it is, but in this case, it wasn't. Scarlett Johansson casting in Ghost in the Shell, true, also really weird. That was okay too, though. It's fine. $5 from Crash Out or Cash Out say, how would we create a debate of me versus Mooncake about feminine effects of Black community? Well, first step is you ask me to. Second step, DM me on Twitter. My Twitter, not Twitter, I'm sorry. DM me on Discord. You can DM me on either one, actually. At Whick TV on Twitter or Whick TV on Discord. My DMs are open, and I will do my best to set that up for you. It should be fun. I would love to host that debate. I don't know if she's down. But assuming she's down, I would absolutely love to moderate that. You can have at it, right? Thursday of next week, we are going to be talking with Doobie, with Prime Kai, with Tali Bots, and with Natsa Erudite. And we're going to be debating the Israel question. Should the U.S. sanction Israel? Is Israel committing a genocide? Should the Israel state even exist? Blah, blah, blah. Should be a fun debate. Yes, I would watch a white remake of Roots. Look, I would watch a documentary about MLK, where MLK is played by Brad Pitt. I would watch the shit out of that, okay? I think it'd be okay. For a horse girl pretty. Okay. Lots of exciting topics coming up. Indeed. And then, what we're trying to do, this isn't 100% yet, but next Friday, so not tomorrow, but the Friday following, we're going to have Diane Yap on the show. And me and Talibots are going to be interviewing her. Diane Yap has made some interesting tweets, makes a lot of men angry. Is she a radical feminist? Close enough. We're going to have her and we're going to have Xerxes on. And they're going to talk. That should be fun. Really? Brad Pitt? Or, who is that guy? Man, the name's escaping me. And it shouldn't escape me because he's a pretty popular guy. Plays in a lot of roles. He played in Groundhog Day. What's the guy's name? Bill Murray. Thank you. I don't know why that name... I kept wanting to say Hank Hill, but I knew it wasn't Hank Hill. Bill Murray. Thank you. Yes, I would absolutely watch Bill Murray play Martin Luther King in a race-switched role where it was the whites who were oppressed and the blacks who were in charge. I would absolutely watch the shit out of that. I am not American, perhaps, right? That's one of our cultural touchstones. I do at some point, and again, obviously not next week, because next week's full up. We got shows every single day. Monday, I have a conversation with a gentleman as well about the problems on the right, not woke right specifically, but just the un-Americanness of a lot of the people on the right. So that should be a fun discussion too. But again, I don't know. Maybe it's because it's later in the day, but names are blanking on me right now, so I can't remember his name. Forgive me, ladies and gentlemen, forgive me. I don't know why I'm blanking on so many names. But I do want to have a discussion, one of those highbrow ones, on what it means to be an American. What are American values? What are American values? Can you tell me, chat? When you think of American values, what do you think of? Individual freedom. Apple pie. Is apple pie a value? Hillbillies? Is that a value? I don't think that's value either. Values, gang. Values. Fakeness? What do you mean by that, Little Slippers? Also, it's been a while since I've seen you, Little Slippers. Welcome to the show again. Nine Ong says burger and guns. Again, those aren't values. Freedom of expression. Consumerism. Those are values. Okay. What does it mean? What are American values? Because, like, you are so fucking fake nice all the time. Am I fake? Are Americans fake nice all the time? Is that what we are? Toby-Wan Kenobi says being hardworking. Extreme individualism from concluding proscript. Rabid Wombat says rape culture and patriarchy. Vibe on says loving your country even when it is wrong and know you can fight for those values. Again, I'm trying to get obviously it's a harder question than you think to answer, right? And I want to talk about it. And I want to talk about why, in my opinion, we've lost some very important touchstones as an American community. We've lost a lot of our values. We've betrayed some of our values. And I want to talk about that with some people and talk about how we can get them back. But we're going to discuss it. And I need the right cast for that. And I need Eucharist on that show. Frankly, I can't do the show without Eucharist. So it's going to be subject to his whims of when we can do it. What do I think about condoms? Useless. Never use them. They're just keeping the man down, right? Why would I put a raincoat on? You need Ice Beans? Ice Beans is welcome on my show any day, anytime. Anytime she wants to come on. Does she want to be part of the great titty debate? Little Slippers, here is your mission, should you choose to accept it. You need to recruit Ice Beans for the Tuesday great titty debate. Okay? Go ahead. Do it. You can try. There is no try. Do or do not. Okay? You can do it. I promise you. It'll be good. Tell her to DM me. I can convince her if you can't. I'm a very good convincer of people. I think that's it, ladies and gentlemen. I think we're done for the day. Let's raid into Mooncake, actually. And I will tell you guys, I will see you Monday. And tune in tomorrow to watch Not So Erudite on Tim Pool. And cheer her on, gang. That's fun. I'll see you guys. Okay, wave bye-bye, everyone. Bye-bye. This takes so long. There we go.